Now, the other day in an interview with Vulture, Alan Bergman, co-chairman of Disney Entertainment, said what a lot of us already assumed about why The Acolyte did not get a second season when he said of the show that we were happy with our performance, but it wasn't where we needed it to be given the cost structure of that title, quite frankly, to go and make a season 2. So that's the reason why we didn't do that. Put another way, and even more plainly, I suppose, it simply didn't have enough people watch the first season in order to make a second season, given how much that first season cost to make. And we learned not long ago that the price tag on that first season was around $230 million, which, yeah, obviously is a ton of money. That's pretty much on par with the budget of a major special effects jam-packed motion picture. And when you consider, based on the numbers we got from Nielsen, the viewership numbers, that it was the least watched of the live-action Star Wars shows on Disney+, at least at the time, there are some early indicators that Skeleton Crew is doing even worse when it comes to the numbers, though in my opinion it is a better, more enjoyable show, for whatever that's worth. And when Bergman was asked about Skeleton Crew in that same interview, he did say that they have seen some growth on that and that it's had excellent reviews, also adding, so we'll have to see how that all plays out as it moves forward. So maybe internally the numbers at Disney aren't as bad for Skeleton Crew as, again, the little we have learned about them from places like Illuminate or sites like Illuminate who track streaming service viewership, and where we haven't seen Skeleton Crew cracking into the top 10 original shows with its first few episodes. But anyway, even though, again, based on all the numbers we had, the viewership numbers and that budget of $230 million, it seemed pretty self-evident that The Acolyte didn't get a second season simply because of those numbers, because they didn't exactly add up, shall we say. Some simple math told us that it wasn't worth it for Disney and Lucasfilm to make another season of a show that was that expensive and didn't have many people watching it. That a second season wasn't likely to help their Disney Plus subscription numbers, shall we say. However, even with those numbers, that didn't stop some out there, mainly, of course, those who had really enjoyed The Acolyte and had even started an online petition to convince Disney to go ahead with a second season despite the numbers. But the very clear poor viewership numbers and the bloated budget, that didn't stop some from suggesting that there was a whole other reason for its cancellation, that this was Disney giving into and listening to the haters who had trashed the show from the very start, and even since, to be fair, in some cases, since even before its release, in large part because of Leslie Headland being picked to head the project given her association with Harvey Weinstein, once being a personal assistant of his, and many figuring, though no, there is no evidence of any wrongdoing on her part, and she was never charged with anything, but many figuring she must have known something about what her old boss was up to, and yet she did and said nothing about it. Not to mention, again in regards to Headland, from many of the interviews she gave before the show came out, she seemed far more interested in what the show represented than it just being a good Star Wars show that the fans would enjoy, because, it was a good Star Wars show actually. She seemed to be yet another creator, another writer and or director given the helm of a Star Wars series that cared more about what she could do with Star Wars rather than what the show could do for Star Wars and its fans. And so, because of these reasons, many rejected the show, even before it came out. Though many more did indeed give it a chance. They watched it hoping for a good Star Wars series, but quickly found it had, in their opinion, plenty of issues or just featured things about Star Wars that they didn't appreciate or didn't think fit in with Star Wars. It seemed to almost revel in tearing down the Jedi in order to prop up the Sith and make them the heroes of the story, which seems to go against everything Star Wars stands for. And though, no, not every Jedi throughout the history of the Star Wars galaxy has been perfect, plenty have been flawed, and we even had a whole trilogy about one, about a flawed Jedi and what happened as a result, and also as a result of the Jedi Order being a bit aloof and detached, though certainly still good and very well-meaning and intended, perhaps too well-intended, which is why they fell into the trap of Palpatine, and became generals in the Clone Wars, which led to their demise. But anyway, not to get into all that, I have no problem showing a flawed Jedi, or showing the Sith side of things, or even showing that they may have a skewed view of the Jedi, and maybe even have a small point here and there for us to consider about the Jedi. But the Acolytes seem to be more interested in overt sabotage of the Jedi rather than a truly nuanced examination of their ways. It seemed like justifying the Sith at the expense of the Jedi was one of its goals. And again, that just flies in the face of Star Wars itself. It flies in the face of everything George Lucas himself has said about the Jedi, what they are and represent, and why they were indeed defeated in the prequels. Anyway, even though there are, or were, or so I believe, plenty of good, well thought out, and fair arguments out there against The Acolyte, arguments that laid out why it was not a very good show, ones that go beyond, just the treatment of the Jedi, that argue this simply wasn't a very well written series, that many of the characters were inconsistent or one-dimensional and bland. There were, of course, still the usual arguments that people weren't liking the show, or weren't watching, or even review bombing without watching, because of, let's call them, ist reasons. They were racist and were sexist or homophobic or something along those lines, when again, the show just wasn't very good. And there are other Disney Plus Star Wars shows that have come out that have included diversity, let's call it, a fair share of it, or a lot of it, on par with The Acolyte, or even more, and were very, very well received, even loved and heavily praised by the same people criticizing The Acolyte, with Andor being the best example of this happening, though honestly, even shows like The Mandalorian have had plenty of diversity, and no one's really had any issue in those cases. Yes, sometimes fans go too far and say things that are certainly inappropriate and come off way worse than maybe they intended, but not every time something that has diversity in it is rejected does that mean the people who reject it are bad, terrible people. And so anyway, yes, plenty out there assumed that The Acolyte had been canceled because of the bad people out there who didn't like it for the wrong reasons, instead of just really trying to listen to push past against some of that loud noise that goes along with criticizing Star Wars sometimes, or goes too far. They didn't try to understand what fellow fans actually didn't like about it. They didn't want to understand that the vast, vast majority of people who didn't like The Acolyte, or just didn't watch it, were simply unhappy with the show itself, or not happy with Disney Star Wars on the whole as of late, that it has been not handled the best under their leadership. That The Acolyte being canceled had nothing to do with Disney bending the knee to haters, and I am not a fan of Disney. I would not defend them if I in any way, shape, or form thought this was the case. Instead, it was simply them canceling a show because so few have interest in Star Wars these days, for one, because of, as I just said, the past handling of it, and because many who gave it a chance, they just didn't like it for one of many reasons. And that's why it got poor viewership, and that is why it is being canceled. Because in all reality here, when it comes to Disney, all that matters to them is the numbers. There could have been twice the amount of hate for The Acolyte online, or 3 or 4 or 10 times as much. And if the numbers had been there, if the viewership numbers had been there, if people had watched it, and if maybe the budget had been a bit more reasonable, there would be a second season on the way right now. And don't get me wrong here, Disney does hope you like their Star Wars shows and movies, but not because they care if the fans are enjoying it and feel happy with the franchise on the whole for the sake of them being happy with it, but because if you like it, you're likely to buy more of it, you're likely to spend more on it. And this all goes along with the main reason Disney Star Wars has, let's be real, again, when we simply look at numbers, why Disney Star Wars has been a failure. Why ratings keep dropping on these shows, why it has taken them so long to get another movie out, and why merchandise tends to just rot on store shelves. It's because they don't really care what their fans actually want. They don't listen to them. They only care about what they think will make them the most money, which ironically would be probably listening to the fans. But that simply isn't how it works anymore. It is about finding the cheapest way to make the most money, which is another reason why The Acolyte was canceled. It was really, really expensive. Even if the ratings had been good, I don't know that they make a second season for another $230 million. But anyway, they didn't spend $4 billion to buy a Lucasfilm from George Lucas in order to honor it and make Star Wars the best it could be for the sake of it, again, being the best it could be. They didn't spend that kind of money because they loved it and were so eager to do right by it and its fans. They spent that kind of money simply for the brand name, for the built-in audience that came with it, and cashing in on it as much as they possibly could, which is why we have to try to hold them accountable as fans. You may love everything Disney Star Wars, you may get frustrated when fans criticize it, but those fans criticizing it try to keep Disney a massive multi-billion-dollar corporation. They try to keep them honest and giving us the best Star Wars they actually can. Put another way here, they don't care about Star Wars itself. The top dogs, the top execs at Disney are not fans of the franchise. They are only fans of what they can do with it. They didn't buy Lucasfilm in order to create something people would love. They bought it to create content people would buy. And those fans, those customers, they did not buy the Acolyte. And hence, from their point of view, there is no reason to make a second season if they don't think it'll sell. They don't care that there are fans out there petitioning for more because they actually enjoyed it. They just care that it won't sell as many subscriptions as they want it to. This is not a case of giving in to the haters by Disney. Well, I guess in a manner of speaking it is, because, or so it seems, the haters seem to be large enough in number to have a major impact on viewership. But it wasn't anything they said about the show that got Disney to cancel it. It was, again, simply because they didn't watch it, and that wasn't going to change with a second season. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about all this. Do you think the Acolyte was treated unfairly and should have been given the chance to continue with a second season? Or was it simply a bad show and deserved to be canceled? Whatever you think, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.